Okay, we're on. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today is May 4th. Welcome to the special meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission. May I have roll call, please?
Commissioner Merabian,
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Sulayan,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiseman,
Here.
Commissioner Welch,
Here.
Chairperson Sahakian.
Okay. I guess we need to nominate who's going to be the interim chairs, even though
Yes.
Election of the chair.
Do
So that item would be read into the record.
Okay, next item, Ms.
a posting of the agenda. The agenda for the Monday, May 4th, 2009 special meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission was posted by Friday, May 1st, 2009, before 5:30 p.m. on the bulletin board outside of City Hall. Item number 2, selection of new chairperson for the Transportation and Parking Commission for 1 year.
Okay. Could I entertain someone?
I would like to nominate Mr. Salayan.
Do we need a second for this, Mrs. Soni?
Mr. Chair Pro Tem, you do not need a second.
Okay. Then may
Yes.
I have roll call?
Card.
Oh, yeah. I have a card before calling for roll call. Mr. Herbert Milano?
Good evening, Chair Pro Tem Sulayan, members of the Transportation Commission and Parking, city staff. My name is Herbert Molano. It was about a year ago that I came to speak before you. In addition to all the other meetings during the year that I was able to come before you, my concern last year during this nomination process was a particular complaint, and the complaint was that the year before, more than half of the meetings of this commission were canceled, of the regular meetings, more than half. Some of that trend continued into the past year, and I know that it is the chair that sets the agenda and should be setting the schedule as well, not the city staff. It was Mr. Sahakian who had mentioned to me in his defense that it was not he who had canceled the meetings, but it was the staff that told him that there was nothing to discuss. Upon which I presented at another session a listing of things that this commission could address. I think that this commission needs someone who is truly going to take charge and represent the public. Mr. Sulayan, you have been with this commission many years, and I've seen you in action in taking on the things that sometimes other commissioners don't want to take. So it is my suggestion that you accept the nomination and take this thing forward, because I think that we need regularly scheduled and hopefully agendized items well in advance so that the public can become more of a participatory element in this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. Okay. Sansoni, can you guide me? What will be the next? Oh,
Number 4.
number 4. Okay.
There is a procedure for electing the new chairperson. It's first read into the agenda, which is what we've done now, and then you as Chair Pro Tem have declared the nominations are now in order. Okay. One member, Commissioner Weissman, has made the nomination. No second is required.
Okay.
The next you would ask if there were any further nominations.
Okay. Any further
I
nominations?
nominate Rudy Sunaya.
Okay. If there are no further nominees are now closed,
That's correct.
and then
You would then ask for a vote
Okay,
of
that's what
the
I was-
first nomination.
okay. Can we ask for a vote?
By
You
acclamation.
do that. You can do that by roll call. That's
Okay.
probably
May I
the
have-
best way.
May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Merabian,
Yes. Thanks.
Chair Pro Tem Sulayan,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiseman,
Yes.
Commissioner Welch,
Yes.
Chairperson Sahakian.
Okay, thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Just make sure you drive slowly.
I will. I will. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Okay, next item is City Clerk.
Item number 3, report regarding maximum number of taxi cabs and taxi cab services in the city of Glendale. At 1 is motion to reduce cap to 81 taxi cabs.
Okay. Do any of you have any cars that would like to fill up? Or thank you. Now, do we need to open the agenda and then take all?
Yes, if we can read the agenda into the record, Mr. Chairman, and then I'll give you a brief report on the item.
Okay.
Item 3.
That was read already, so.
I
we can-
apologize.
Right.
I was not paying attention to that. Mr. Chairman, if members of the Commission, if I may, want to give you an overview of the staff report that we have prepared for Commission's consideration. As you're well aware of, the Municipal Code allows the Commission or gives authority to the Commission to set limits on what we call vehicle for hire, whether it's on non-emergency vehicles that you have considered over the last year, throughout the last year, or on taxi cab permits. They're slightly different. The taxi cab permit is handle the requirements for taxi cabs is different than the vehicle for hire. Most of the cab companies, cab businesses are companies, they're corporations that operate whether in one city or multiple cities. Cities have different requirements. So some cities allow one driver just apply for a permit to a city, get a license, they check their insurance and move on. Some cities like Glendale, we go through what we call the need and necessity process. We want to make sure that if there is a need for providing cab business in Glendale, there are certain criteria that we have set aside, and based on that criteria, we allow companies to operate. A number of years ago, we had different companies operating in Glendale. We didn't have as much as a strong or very restrictive requirement, whether it had to do with the level of service, whether the type of vehicles the cab companies provided, whether the customer service training that's required. The age of the vehicles became a concern for us. So with the Transportation Parking Commission members, we formed a subcommittee. And we invited the existing cab operators at the time, or they were actually new cab operators. Also, we formed a committee. We looked at the existing ordinance. We looked at other cities what their ordinances were. We put together a new ordinance. We modified the ordinance with the Commission's recommendation. City Council approved it to come up with what we call our current municipal code requirements for vehicle for hire as it relates to taxi cabs. So that worked well. I think it served us well because now we're making sure that the quality that we think is good for our residents, it's there. In terms of level of service, the type of vehicles that the current operators are providing. And then taxis, usually over years, they change hands. You have one operator that's maybe is acquiring cabs from another operator, so they change colors and hands. So let me put it this way. It's the simplest way. One company acquires another company, the name goes from yellow cab to gray cab or checker cab or whatever it is. So they change hand depending on the level of business that they're doing in that particular geographic area. So if you look at what we have in Glendale currently, we have 5 cab companies. They have joint ownership in some of them. There's 81 cabs that are licensed in Glendale currently. As part of our process, when we revised the municipal code, we set a cap on how many cabs could operate in Glendale. That cap wasn't really an arbitrary number. We just looked at how many cabs had been operating in Glendale over the years. Was there a big demand for cabs in Glendale? That has fluctuated slightly, but pretty much has stayed steady as it was shown in the staff report on the number of taxi cab companies in Glendale. Since 2003 to 2009 present, there's 5 cab companies, as I stated. Some of the ownership of these cab companies has switched or changed, but pretty much the same cab operators have been operating in the city of Glendale. So at this point, we wanted to see if there is additional demand for cabs, primarily because we had a new company, United Independent Taxi, applied to Glendale in terms of adding additional cabs. What we had advised the commission that at the time, if we get, because in the past years we haven't had anybody come to Glendale ask for additional cabs. We said if we get an application, we will do an update on the existing status of the cab business in Glendale, give you this background information in terms of existing operators, their level of service versus additional services that may be needed. Give you an idea what the number of trips that are being generated in Glendale based on computerized data that we receive from the existing operator. There's about 8,300 cab trips. These are all pickups that occur in Glendale. And technically those pickups are people who call in and they get a cab and they get picked up in Glendale. If you do not have a permit in Glendale, you cannot pick up in Glendale. You can always drop off a passenger in Glendale, but you cannot pick up. If you have a license, then you can pick up on the return trip. If a cab operator has a permit to operate in Glendale, Burbank, Pasadena Airport, and have a permit in Glendale, let's say if they pick up a passenger at the airport, they drop it off in Glendale. If there is if there's another trip is available and the dispatch calls them and says, okay, there's another trip available to go to L.A., then they can pick it up. If not, either they're staying in Glendale or they're going to go back to where they came from if they have a taxi stand or they were in the airport. Most of the cab operators in the industry, if they have a permit to operate in an airport, technically they go back to the airport because that's usually those are more expensive trips. In other words, the length of the trip usually is longer. They can make more money because that's just sitting idle does not make money if they were sitting in Glendale or any other location. So cab companies, technically, they spread their cabs based on their demand that they know, and so that they can have the shortest trip to the customer, depending on where the customer is, so that they can pick it up. The current operators, we work with our city clerk's office. We actually do checks. In other words, we do random checks on the cab operators. We actually are the passengers to make sure that whoever gets picked up, if one of our staff gets picked up, they have their license, they're displaying their emblem on the door. They charge the right fare amount, and they're courteous to the passenger. So we do that. We did a survey from 2006 to now to see how many complaints we had received about our existing operator. We have a total of 17 complaints. So those 17 complaints, some of them had to do with the not understanding the fare structure or whatnot. Nothing was major, and Mr. Rodriguez is here if you have any questions specifically as to that. The other part of it, the city clerk does, we do annual inspections of the cab companies, making sure they're safe, their brake lights work, that all the required regulatory requirements are met by the cab company. So that's done through our city clerk's office. If you have any questions specific to that, Mr. Rodriguez is present here to answer those. So I won't go into that detail in terms of that. So basically, we're looking to see if we need to increase or keep the existing cap that we have, or we need to reduce that. We also looked at, our staff did the research of the existing major generators in Glendale. We looked at Americana, as just recently opened last year, to see if that was generating additional cab trips. As a matter of fact, before Americana opened, the commission approved taxi stands because we want to reduce trips, and if we have taxi stands that are available in the downtown, again with the assistance of commission, and we work with the cab operators to determine what are the key locations where we can put in taxi stands, and we install them so that there's a cab visible rather than you call the dispatch. You can walk to a taxi stand and pick up a cab. Results we got from Americana does not show that there is a high demand, maybe one cab trip per day. I know the cab companies may have different data because they do their own marketing, so we've invited all the cab companies, the existing operators, including the UITD, to be present here to advise the Commission on what their perspective of the market is, what the demand is. So collectively, with that information, Commission can make a decision on us to keep the cap right we have, reduce it by one that we were recommending, or increase it if you think, based on this information, it's necessary to do so. We checked the Burbank Airport, LAX, and as you know, given the economy, there's between 10 to 15% reduction in air travel. Automatically, that translates into a reduction in transportation services, whether it's cab companies or their shuttles, airport shuttles. So their level of service gets reduced because of automatically of the economy. So if you look at the page 4 of the staff report, whenever we've had a cab company come to Glendale, what we do is we do a test of the need and necessity. We say, does the current operator, regardless of the cap that we have, do the current operator meet the demand as it is today? What is the effect of multiple service providers? You know, you always want to have some competition, level of competition in the city, and making sure that one cab company does not have a monopoly technically. Is there, based on the growth and demand that in the city, in this case, for example, Americana was open, you have Embassy Suites that has opened, has the demand gone up? What is the scope of services provided by the current operator? Are they reliable? In terms of you place a call, did you get a cab in a reasonable 10 to 15 minute window? Can they handle the load? I mean, if there are too many passengers on the cab and they cannot respond effectively, are there major complaints against the current operator? So if they're not doing a good job, that's all the good reasons we have to say this operator doesn't meet it. We may have to reduce their number of cabs that they operate. Are they providing any innovative services? I mean, natural gas vehicles or any type of a new vehicle that provide an enhancement to the existing services. Based on what's been happening in Glendale in terms of from the economy side, and then there hasn't been, at least we haven't been able to verify, that there's been a tremendous increase in the cab service in Glendale. The fact that if a cab operator drops a passenger in Glendale, and so they automatically need to pick up somebody, we don't think that's a good logical reason to add more cabs. Otherwise, every city has to license every cab companies, and most cities, as you can see, there is across the board. Some cities have one cab company operated. We provide you with a table of that shows, what cities like Burbank, Pasadena, Torrance, Inglewood, Long Beach, Santa Monica, Anaheim, and how many cab companies they're operating in those cities and how many cabs they're operating. And it varies across the spectrum, such as Santa Monica has a tremendous number of cab operators, but those are all individual cab operators, which our understanding based on our research, they're going to go either to a franchise concept or they will limit the number of cab operators. The concern becomes, again, from my background working for City of Beverly Hills, which is a very active city in terms of its tourism and the number of hotels that it serves. So you have a lot of people who are, cab companies that serve that city. The more, it doesn't matter how many cab companies you add. It's just that if you're competing against the same number of fares, then it goes beyond the quality sacrifices, doesn't improve, actually goes the other direction. Because that's one of the other things that Beverly Hills has done, try to put a cap, limit on the number of cab operators, and making sure that the quality does not sacrifice. So overall recommendation right now is to keep the cap the same. In fact, we want to say reduce it by one based on the existing number of cap. Commission can review that cap again next year. We'll give you an updated report. If the economy is picking up, there's a tremendous number of trips that are increasing. Our experience is not only the new operators come in, the existing operators will come in and say, we need more cabs. Then you can open it up. You can get proposals from existing or the new operators to see whether or not which proposal is better for the city in terms of the level of quality of service that they can recommend. And then we can go from there. So those are the options. We can keep the cap the same. We can reduce it to 81. You can, in fact, increase it. I think we have invited all the cab operators. Again, staff is not particularly married to any one of these options because we like to also hear from the operators to provide you input on that. If you feel that you need additional information based on what the input you received today, we'll be happy to go and do additional research, come back to the commission. Because once we establish that cap, if it's reduced to 81, then we will not be considering the other application because there's no taxi cab permits to be given away. But if you increase it, we'll bring back the issue, that item to the commission for your consideration. If you want to go and decrease it because you feel that there isn't enough business, so why should we allow so many cab companies? I think that's something that should take into effect at the next cycle because every year between July and August, the taxi cab operators are required to come in, renew their driver's permits. So if one operator has 20 permits and they only license 8, it's just like use it or lose it provision in the municipal code. If you do not license your permit, you're going to lose it. Once they lose it, that goes back into the pot technically, and then the other operators within the city or new operators can apply for those permits. So that's my report, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. I'll be happy to answer any questions. As I said, we have invited all the existing operators and new applicants to provide you input with that, and at the end of the Commission meeting, you can recommend to staff what course of action you wish to take. Okay. There's a motion for your consideration also.
Thank you, Mr. Batayan. I have a quick question to ask you. On page 3, the number of taxis in Glendale in the last 7 years, the numbers of it shown here, are those licensed or operating?
They're licensed.
Licensed. So do we know offhand, because there's certain years we had 81 and then it gets decreased by 79. You know, what was the reason?
The reason is a cab operator, let's say, didn't have enough cabs and they did not license the vehicle. Or I can ask Mr. Rodriguez to let you know possibly the reason, because that's been 4 or 5 cab permits that haven't been renewed, but then the following year they renewed it.
Okay.
Steve Rodriguez, licensed investigator, city clerk's office. I also have Maria Maldonado. She's also the licensed investigator with me, the city clerk's office. We're the ones that inspect the vehicles and issue the license after they've completed an inspection. It's a little discrepancy here. In 2003, we had 6 Bell, but 6 were under dial ride. So we had 6. The following year, Bell wanted the additional 6, as you can see on page 2. So they went back to 12. In 2004, there was 81. Checker had lost a cab because they didn't have it inspected. In December is when we have 2 inspections a year. We have one in April and one December. If you don't pass the December inspection, you lose that particular cab. In 2005, it was also the 1 checker. In 2006, it was 1 checker and 2 people's taxi that lost. In 2007, I apologize. That's the correct number should be 81.
2006?
2007, instead of 78, it should be 81. That was 1 people's. And in 2008, it was 1 people's, and in 2009, it was 1. And so that's where you got the numbers, the total numbers on page 2nd. That's the current numbers of taxi cabs that are licensed as to today's date. And this is what the norm has been from 2003 to 2009. From 2004 to 2009, it has been 81 taxi cabs.
Okay. Then next question I have quickly, for United Independent, the new company, would that be implemented in July, August timeframe?
I'm not sure if
You said earlier on that it's a new company that is applying for.
United Independent, they applied during the window. We have a window where new applicants can apply. They applied during that window. Because it was, again, in the past 2-3 years, we haven't had any applicants. We took it upon ourselves to do the research and bring it back to the commission as to what the status of the existing taxi services. So unless the commission increases the cap by X number of permits, then there is no permits to be given to them. And when they apply, they technically have to go through that criteria we established to present as part of their application why, they meet the need and necessity requirements in the city of Glendale.
Okay.
So that would happen. Right now, they're entitled to do so as long as we change the cap. As I
Right.
said, you can increase it, you can keep it the same, you can reduce it.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a question for our license inspectors. Mr. Bagdanian made the comment that of the 17 grievances between 2006 and 2009, that most of these, I guess, were nothing major, I think was the way it was characterized. Could I ask if any of those grievances were for refusal of service?
No.
Okay.
And I stand corrected. The 17 grievances means 17 complaints from citizens of Glendale.
Okay.
Once a complaint comes through our office, either myself or Maria will take the complaint, put it in writing, send it to the company, and the company has to respond to us. Out of the 17 complaints, most of them were for minor discrepancies, like maybe affairs, like were a couple of dollars here and there. Only 2 of the complaints were regarding taxi cabs arriving late.
Okay.
And that was the years between 2006 and 2009.
Okay.
We only received 17 complaints.
Yeah, which doesn't seem too bad for that.
No, that's, yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Welch?
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. On the Embassy Suites, when did that open exactly, do you know?
It's been about, I want to say about 3 months.
About 3 months?
Sure, it hasn't been that long. I want to say 3 months.
Okay. So it might be a little early to say whether that's going to have an impact.
That's true.
Okay. And I think the same might be true of Americana also, because while the retail is full, I think the residential part of it is still very low occupancy.
Yes, they're a concierge that provides services, whether it's for they have 2. One is for their actual residents, and yes, unless the residential is full, so not only the rental as well as the units that are being sold, you probably won't see technically a high demand for it, other than their visitors that are coming to Americana. If they get dropped off by a cab, they will probably be picked up by a cab.
Did the Americana have a reduced parking ratio for the residential units, or do they build out parking at the full required?
They met the city's code requirement.
Okay.
I don't remember the specific, but they did actually. I believe they've actually been higher than overall in total number of spaces for the residential, the retail, and their commercial. They're above what the city required because they wanted to make sure they have excess parking available.
And the residential parking is segregated from the retail parking,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And then finally, on the Exhibit A, the last line there where it says taxi caps per population, can you explain what that line is? I'm not sure I understand what the intent it's trying to convey.
Let me ask Yvonne. I wanted to ask that same question, Commissioner Welch, because I believe we were trying to do it first on 1,000 population, or was it just strictly by population?
I think it was 1,000.
Per 1,000. It should be per 1,000 population. So that was I was trying to calculate. Essentially, we're trying to see if there's any correlation between the population and how many caps per the 1,000 population, because when you look at cities, for example, Anaheim, you have Disneyland. If they have 230 cabs and then Santa Monica is 450, again, Santa Monica is a beach city, they have more tourism as well. But I would not use that factor. We tried, but it didn't come up with a number that we can say per thousand population across these different cities of size in terms of their tourist attractions. Here's how many cabs there are. So is that a threshold? So if there was a threshold, and is Glendale in the ballpark in terms of we have the lowest number of cabs probably.
So the goal was taxi cabs, not cabs, because it says cabs. So it's cabs.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. Thank you. Thank you for that correction.
Okay, so you were trying to get some kind of a sense of the correlation there with population.
We attempted.
Okay. Okay, because I mean I know Pasadena and Burbank both have much lower populations than Glendale, and yet they have much higher cab numbers there.
And as you can see, again, you can argue that Burbank, because of the airport,
So that includes airport
Yeah.
cabs? Okay.
and so as a result, an airport cabs they have to be permitted by the airport authority. So they could be licensed in Burbank but not be able to operate they have to get their airport authority permits so that they can pick up at the airport. Same thing is true of LAX. So all airports have their own special permitting process.
Okay, that's
Okay.
it.
Thank you. Okay, at this time then, I'll take the request to speak on agenda number 3. First speaker is Neil Evans. Mr. Neil Evans.
Good evening. I am Neil Evans, attorney for United Taxi of the Southwest. We are trying to be the new guy on the block, so to speak. We were successful in getting into Burbank, which was no small feat, I can assure you. There was tremendous opposition because the existing operator, who also similar to Glendale has multiple cab names under one real umbrella. Mr. Martirosian operates, I think, 3 or 4 different names in Burbank. And we made a big pitch for competition, and the city acknowledged that, accepted that. We had the added benefit that Mr. Martirosian, one of Mr. Martirosian's key companies, failed to timely submit an application in Burbank, and we were the only applicant, so we got 20 permits. We've also been successful in Pasadena and received 50 permits in Pasadena. So we're a company that has a very large fleet throughout Southern California. We're affiliated with United Independent Taxi Drivers, which has about 400 cabs in the city of Los Angeles. We also have cabs in the city of Beverly Hills, city of West Hollywood, South Bay, many other smaller cities in that area. So we're a fully integrated cab company. And the interesting thing about what's on your agenda tonight and the staff recommendation is what they're proposing is to take away one cab, one eligible cab. And it would seem that the benefit to the city of taking away that one cab is non-existent. The detriment to taking away that one cab, arguably, or to not increasing the cabs enough so that we can have a fleet is we can't get into the city. You're a closed city. And the fact that you haven't had applicants over the past several years is more a reflection of the fact you're a closed city, and nobody will try or even bother to submit an application because there's no possibility of getting in. The reality is that if you look at your list on page 2 of your existing taxicab service providers, the impression is that you have 5 companies, but in fact you only have 2 companies. People's Taxi arguably is not part of Mr. Martirosian's fleet, but the other 4 companies are. So you have one company that operates 4 different names or color schemes, and it's the same management, the same location, same everything. And one of the points of that, the reason why someone would do that, one guy that owns everything and then splits it up between different names, is people like to have a choice. And cab operators know that even if they're the only cab in town, it's a benefit to have different names and different identities. So the perception is that people are getting a choice. The reality is they're not. It's the same management, the same organizational structure, the same, essentially, cab drivers interchange between the companies. So I guess my point is this. There's no advantage to the city to taking away that one cab, because that means that we're going to be fighting for no cabs, and it's just like our application will not really be taken seriously. So at least leave one cab on the table that we can apply for to get our foot in the door, if that's the case. But the reality is that when you have, even in a downturn economic times, people still need a choice. And if you add a completely new cab company, not a hybrid of an existing company, but a completely new cab company, what you're going to do is generate interest, generate demand. Every city that we've ever gone into, we had the same opposition that we have here. Well, it's going to take away business from the existing operators. Even in good economic times, we have that same argument. You're going to take away a job or take away and make business more competitive. The reality is that a new operator will bring innovation, will bring interest to the public, will have a completely different style of promoting itself, and you're going to generate business, because that's how you generate business. You don't generate business by being an established company with no competition that sits back and waits for the calls to come in. You establish business by going out to the businesses. This is what we do when we went into Burbank. This is what we've done in all other cities, including Beverly Hills, West Hollywood. When you start up a new cab company, you hire a really good PR person, and you go around and you tell people what the benefits and needs are for use of cabs, and you generate business. In the city of Los Angeles, United Independent Taxi shares with 7 other cab companies the large area of the city of Los Angeles, and there's 22 or 2,300 cabs in that area. But each company has its own way of marketing itself, its own way of developing its business, and each one has a unique way of doing it. And there's a symmetry to that whole thing, the fact that everybody is working really hard to generate more business in an area where there are people that could use cabs that maybe don't already use them. So while I realize that there may be some psychological advantage in saying we're taking away that one cab off the table, I think that's a bad idea. If you really have a downturn in business, you should be reducing the cabs by the amount of the downturn in business, if that's the way you're going to do it. Taking away one cab isn't going to solve anything. But what I would suggest, and I've got 11 seconds left, is that you consider leaving a space for a new cab company. In Burbank, they were talking about increasing the fleet by about 10 cabs to do that. We would ask the same, that instead of taking away this one cab, that you round it off to 10 cabs, so at least we have a good shot at getting into the city and starting to generate business and generate competition. So we're asking that you increase it by at least 9 cabs, and certainly don't take away the one cab that we could try to compete for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Next speaker is Grigor Julfayan.
Good evening. My name is Grigor Julfan. I'm a resident of the city of Glendale for 16 years already. I manage a big doctor's office, almost 365 days open clinic with the work injuries, and we always use United Independent Taxi for our patients to, take them different doctor's office for the second choice. So I'm here to ask you guys to add a couple of cabs to give them the opportunity for United Independent to show them how good they are, and our business are really happy, our clients too, and I think they need a second choice and for the bigger competition, and it's good for the residents of City of Glendale. And I'm here on behalf of City of Glendale, most of my neighbors and friends, because I called one time United Independent for myself to pick me up to take me to work. I had a car problem. They said no, and on this conversation I found out that there is only one company, and to me it's a monopoly, and I would like to have the second choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. John Gantus.
Chairperson Salayan and members of the Transportation and Parking Commission, my name is John Gantis, and I represent GNS Transit as well as Tri-City Transportation. They are listed on your list as owners of 40 of the 81 permits. I think we need to understand the concept of taxi service. We hear the word competition. You have to understand that in the taxi business, each of the owners, each of the taxi cab drivers own their own vehicles. They compete for the business among themselves. They're regulated, if you will, by the fact that the dispatch, the insurance, the advertising is done by GNS or Tri-City, whoever they're operating under. But for the most part, for the largest part, they do compete. And the truth of the matter is, what is competition? What is the purpose of competition but to increase the service to the citizens of Glendale? That's your job. Your job is to ensure that taxi cab service provides the best service you can for people in the city of Glendale. And is that being done? I invite you to review again the staff report. Our on-time performance, not just this year, but for the last 4 years, or 3 years, I should say, has been in excess of 90%. What is on time? 15 minutes or less. Yes, we have Mr. Rodriguez indicating that in a few cases, there were some complaints about the service. They pass those on to us. In every case, we take those very seriously. We contact the people, and we deal with those complaints. As Mr. Rodriguez and Mr. Bagdanian have indicated to you, we have provided excellent service for this city. Let's talk about need and necessity. Just 3 weeks ago, we were in Burbank. Mr. Evans has brought that up, and they considered whether or not there was a need and necessity to add more cabs. It was stipulated, both of us, Mr. Evans and I both told that Transportation Commission, it's called in Burbank, that there was no additional need. And why? Because the figures showed exactly what Mr. Bagdanian is indicating here and what our figures show. Over the past 4 months, the year-to-year numbers in terms of service in the city of Glendale, minus 18% for January, minus 21% for February, minus 20% for March, and minus 22% for April. What does that mean? As an example, for April, the numbers of cab rides for the month of April in 2009 is 22% less than it was in 2008. Let's talk about the airport. Major provider, as Mr. Bagdanian indicated to you. September of last year, minus 16%. October, minus 17% from 2008 to 2007. Let's talk about January to March, a combination from 2008 to 2009, minus 25%. The rides are off 25%. As Mr. Bagdanian has indicated to you, the passengers are down 10%. There just simply is no need for an additional taxis. The idea of cutting down one makes sense. Bottom line, what you're being told is, look, these operators have the opportunity to put on 82 cabs and didn't. They put on 81. Why? Because there's enough business for 81 people. I note in the staff report that Mr. Bagdanian has figured out that the number of rides per month, approximately 8,300, translates to 4 taxi cab rides per day, per taxi. They have, as he indicated, and it's true, a capacity of doing up to 8. So what happens? What happens? These drivers are not able to make a living for themselves. They're having to fend for themselves. Adding more taxis, what are we getting? Less rides per person. Adding more business, look, we're in the business of adding business. Why? More rides? We're going to make money. Our drivers are going to make money. We're going to have happy drivers. The concept of competition is illusory in this matter. The rates are set. You're governed by the city. Everything is taken care of by the city in terms of service. We compete with ourselves, and we have shown it time and time again. We're in the city of Glendale because we provide the best service with the cleanest taxis and the best drivers. And you've not heard, as Mr. Weissman, you've not heard of anybody not picking it up. You've not heard of anybody saying our drivers aren't perfect or aren't on the spot. So we submit that the recommendation of staff is appropriate. Thank you.
Next speaker, you're going to have to excuse me. I can't read the name. Martin Shatokian? Okay.
Good evening. Martin Shatakian from San Gabriel Transit, DBL Cap. I just want to thank staff of City of Glendale for doing a marvelous job in their report. And it shows how familiar they are with the taxi cab business and how professionally they approach to this issue. And I want to thank them again on the record. With regards of business in general, taxi cab business in general, I have to inform the Commission that LAX taxi cab business is down more than 20%, I was informed today. And Burbank Airport business is down more than 25%. And the hotels in the city of Glendale and in general in Los Angeles surrounding areas are operating with 25 to 35% capacity. Venues are empty. There are no tourists. There are no business people around. And even Universal Studios, seriously, were considering about shutting down the studios for 2 business days every week. So that's how bad is it. With regards of City of Glendale taxi cab business, we already heard, and thanks for that information, we're down 25%. Now, what other cities are doing in this economic hard situation with regards of taxi cab business? For example, City of Santa Monica, currently having more than 450 taxi cabs and 55 taxi cab companies. This coming September, which is 4 months away, they're going to have only 250 taxi cabs, which is significant cut from 450, and between 5 to 7 taxi cab companies left. That's what City of Santa Monica is doing based on need and necessity, which doesn't exist at this point, not only in City of Santa Monica, but in Los Angeles, West Hollywood, Beverly Hills, Glendale, Burbank, and Pasadena. With regards of logic of obtaining a taxi cab license anywhere any taxi company drops off, in this particular case, we're talking about United Taxi of Southwest. Well, I have to inform this commission that my drivers are dropping off in Sacramento, in Bakersfield, sometime, in Fresno. Some of them go to Las Vegas. Some of them, one of my drivers went to Denver, Colorado. Well, I wish this will happen with them every day, but it doesn't happen every day. But now, if we take this logic as a rule, in a year or two, my company will be licensed all over in California. In 2-3 years, I'll go multi-state, and probably in a decade or two, I'll go nationwide. That's not how taxi cab business works. What we do, we pick up people and take them to their destinations, and whenever they need a taxi, if I have the license for that area which I dropped off, I'll go pick him up with a pleasure. But if I don't, there are always locally licensed taxi cab companies, and they will be happy to pick up that person. When it comes to number of the trips dropped off in City of Glendale, based on my experience, they're not exceeding, by United Taxi Southwest, they're not exceeding more than 5 or maybe 10 a day, not more than that. With regards of Georgi Julfayan, I believe, I'm sorry if I'm not, Grigor Julfayan's statement here, with all the respect to his statement, I have to tell you that picking up in any city, in this case we're talking about City of Glendale, picking up in Glendale without having a license, taxi cab license, for a City of Glendale is at least a misdemeanor. It's not legal. You cannot pick it up. And according to his statement, he was calling to United Taxi of Southwest or United Independent Taxi, I don't know which one, and they were picking passengers in Glendale, which is illegal. That's exactly what he said. And with regard of Mr. Nilevan's statement that there is a need and necessity, as John Gantus said, on April 21st, on Burbank City Council meeting, he agreed with our corporate attorney, John Gantus, that there is no need and necessity in City of Burbank, and it contradicts his own statement that Burbank City Council is considering to add 10 units, or Transportation Committee is considering to add 10 units in City of Burbank. It's not true. That's not what they think, and that's not what they intended to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Vic Kakosian.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Vic Kakosian. I'm the Public Relations Manager for United Taxi. Well, it is all about competition. Okay, there's one thing a lot of people do not understand. There are 2 types of different structures in the taxi business, in companies. Okay, United Taxi, and there's one other company that exists in LA. The structure of United Taxi and this other company is such, all the cabs are owned by members of the company. We're an association. Everybody owns their cab. It's a nonprofit corporation. UITD and United Taxi of the Southwest both are nonprofit corporations. All the cabs are owned by owners, unlike this other competition. In this particular case in Glendale, a company owns most of these cabs. Okay, they do sell their cabs under the table. If you check, you will see that all the cabs of GNS Transit and People's Taxi and all of those, they belong to the company. They're on their company name. Okay, these drivers, yes, they come, they pay money under the table, buy their cabs. They never put their names on these cabs, and they're out there. Yes, it is about competition, and we know United knows about competition because we own our cabs. We care about our business. We care about our drivers, and like I said, United company itself is a management company. We do everything for the drivers because drivers are the company. And there are different ways to market. We know a better way to market. That's why we're growing all the time, even in bad economic times. Nobody's denying times are tough, but it's not always going to be like this. We have to do something, right? If we sit and say there's no business, let's do nothing, it's going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. I mean, today we're here to ask for a chance to work in Glendale. We are in Burbank, we are in Pasadena. We start all the way from Palmdale, Lancaster, all the way in the south to Redondo Beach. United services all these areas, and we are successful. We've been around for more than 32 years now. We'd like to have a chance to service the people of Glendale. A lot of our drivers live in the city of Glendale. They would like to have a chance to be able to step out of their vehicles, step into their vehicles and take calls. Right now they cannot. Their neighbors ask our drivers to take them to the airport. They cannot. They get caught, they get in trouble. They cannot do that. And when Mr. Greg, I think Julfayan, was saying, I know this person. He owns a medical office in L.A., so there's a misunderstanding here. He calls us in L.A. He's very happy with our service. His office is down the street from our office. He calls us, uses it all the time. We send him cabs all the time. And his point was he wants to do the same thing in Glendale. Okay, so we just need that chance, please. Yes, Americana is new, and it's not filled yet. It's going to create business. This hotel, Embassy Suites, is going to create business. It's going to take time, of course. For the past 6-7 years, as indicated in the report, there was no need for more caps. So why did we keep this 82, the cap at 82? And this is when we try to get in to make more a little bit competition, because like most of these cabs, most of these 5 companies are owned by one person. There's no competition there. They have the same management. They have the same dispatch. If somebody complains about yellow cab, next time he gets city cab. Somebody complains about city cab, next time he gets the other cab. This is how they try to keep their people happy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Mr. Melise Adamu.
Good evening. My name is Melisa Adamu. I represent United. I am the president of United Independent Taxi and United Taxi of the Southwest. We applied in city of Glendale in 2007. Of course, at that time the business was not like this. It was a very good business. We applied for 70 licenses. We have been waiting until now, and now we have a report that it says we have to reduce the number of taxis because of the number of trips has gone down. The number of trips has gone down by 10% or 17%, but in actuality we are reducing only one taxi, which will take, as the report says, 4 trips a day. How is the balance? How do we calculate this? If we wanted to reduce the number of taxis on the number of services that we are getting, we have to reduce 17% of the taxis or 10% of the taxis that are in service. This came just to block United Taxi of the Southwest, not to get even a single license. That's what it came. That's how I see it. And also in the report, it says 8,314 calls, unless otherwise all the vehicles are having smart meter. Nobody knows how many flag downs they get. This is only registered calls on the computer. Nobody knows. And that will not be added to this. And in 4 trips a day, unless the trips are $40 to $50 per trip, I don't think nobody will leave. I'm telling you honestly. I have been a taxi driver. I was a taxi driver before I become president, and I am elected president. I will go and drive a taxi. If it is 4 trips a day, I don't think the taxi drivers will sustain to leave. But in actuality, this is only computerized trips that was registered. Unless they do have a smart trip, they cannot do it. The only city that requires a smart meter is City of Los Angeles, we installed now in the City of Burbank, City of West Hollywood, and City of Beverly Hills, and we installed also in South Bay unit. All those, the flag down, that somebody flagged them down, they get in the taxi, that tells us how much money even they make. That's how we know. That's how we see the business. So there are flaws on the report, and also City of Los Angeles. By the way, I will give you this as an evidence. We're trying to give 50 licenses for the City of Los Angeles. We're going to issue. There will be 50 licenses addition to the one that we have 2,303. If there is no business, if there is nothing, why did all this come? City of Hermosa Beach, we used to be 35 vehicles per company for 4 companies. Now we're going to add 4 additional units. And if we see also City of Santa Monica, yes, there are too many taxis, but City of Santa Monica who are working there are United Independent Taxi, Yellow Cab, and all Los Angeles licensed licensed vehicles. They go in, they pick up, and they go. They don't stage there, they don't stay there, they're not permanently there. We can see from all these companies, if we see 10% in the city, that's a miracle. We're not. That's not how it is. And the City of Santa Monica is trying to put franchises because they wanted to regulate the taxi companies, because they don't want one taxi company to be there. They wanted, in fact, at the meeting, we were told, and it's not finalized yet, the city council didn't vote for it. It says one company should have from 25 to 50. And they suggest, the RFP who studies RFP, they said from 4 companies to 8 companies should be allowed. It's not yet decided. And the Inglewood, it says on the report, 1 taxi company. Actually, we are 3, because United is licensed, Yellow Cab is licensed in City of Inglewood, and also All Yellow is licensed in the City of Inglewood. We are 3 companies. There are a lot of things to say, and also why we are looking for Glendale. It's because people see us, the drivers live in Glendale, they call us, we're transferring calls to these companies. In 2008, we transferred 1,100 calls. In 2009, we transferred 300 calls. They call us, we transfer to City Cab or People's Taxi. So that's why we are saying, no, our members or our drivers should have a license to work, to pick up here. We're not planning to stay here. When we apply 70, we're not planning to stay here all the time. It's not. It's not practical. We wanted all the vehicles to be licensed. When they come, we wanted them to pick up. We wanted them to give them a chance. Either let them pick up their friends, relatives across the street, and they go out. That's what we are saying. So I think this commission, we have been waiting the last 2 years. Hopefully, we will be considered, and I thank you for the staff, and I thank you again, and congratulations for your election.
Thank you. I have one more speaker, Mr. Petros Keshishian.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and fellow members of the Commission. My name is Petros Keshishian, representing People's Taxi. Well, we have heard discussions. Let me introduce you to some numbers regarding People's Taxi and the business that we had and we have as we speak, and then I'll address a couple of more issues. The last quarter of 2008 compared to last quarter of 2007, People's Taxi's demand for the calls was reduced 17.67%. Furthermore, the first quarter of 2009 compared to the first quarter of 2008, that slide continued, another 2.45%. So within 20 months or less, We lost a shade below 20% of our business. As some of the speakers here mentioned that there are only calls in the computer. Well, a sample is a sample. So that's in support of the staff's recommendation here, 100% accurate data verifiable. Now I have a couple of other things to show. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but I have heard people who came here and gave their opinion, so I kind of here to shed a better light on that if you are here, you got to tell the truth. Number one, in the city of Los Angeles, that there are two cab companies that are associations. Well, they focused on that. Well, how come the city of Los Angeles is not making the other cab companies as associations? I think there's a reason for that. They started some 20 years ago, if not 27 years ago, the start and the end of that era of associations. We'll go about the cities that they have been licensed, that they kept talking about it. City of Burbank. They've been there by about a year, if I'm not mistaken. Is that my place to talk about City of Burbank? Because I'm not licensed there. Well, not too long ago, they said they had in total number of calls that they service in a day is only 17 calls. Well, where did they get that number? Do they count all the pickups? If that's the case, worse yet, that means nobody calls. If that 17 trips are not only the trips that phone calls were made to their dispatcher, add in the number of pickups on the street, where is the business that they are going to generate? What happened to all of the business? One more issue, City of Pasadena. That's where I'm licensed. They got 50 permits for City of Pasadena. City of Pasadena doesn't have the ordinance that we have in City of Glendale. Well, yet, it was a year ago, yet I have seen one, not even one, United Cab license in City of Pasadena. Thank you.
Thank you. I have some quick questions if I can ask before I ask my colleagues. Is it true the four companies that the speaker spoke, that is the same management, same owner?
Mr. Chairman, I think we should point the question to the attorney. As I said, these companies change hands, or they have shared ownership, or they have partnerships, shareholders, and the city, we're not in a position to, verify each one, but that's something that if you wish to address to the one of the companies, and there's not a requirement one way or the other. However, we've seen cab companies over the years, existing cab companies within City of Glendale, that they've changed ownership. They've been purchased by one owner, sold, purchased back again. So they change hands or they change color in terms of that. So it's true that cab companies, they may have under same ownership, and they do business under, yellow cab or white cab or whatever that might be. So that's...
The reason I asked that is because I was wondering, since we set the rates, the fare rates, how does competition work?
Mr. Chairman, may I have to correct you? We do not regulate the rates for the cab companies. We require that they provide us with the rates. We present that to the commission, but we do not set the rate, for example, say it should be $2.85. Most of the time, most cab companies follow the City of Los Angeles rate because that's a geographically larger city. They want to be consistent, and we like to be consistent with other cities so that the person who gets into the cab does not, as soon as they change boundaries, they go from Glendale to Burbank to Pasadena or to L.A., all of a sudden their rate structure changes. At some point, we like to work with our neighboring cities to make sure at least within the three, Glendale, Burbank, Pasadena, we have some kind of a similar rate structure because we're concerned that, the customer can have a difficulty all of a sudden once they're paying their final fare they're told that, oh, we were this many miles in city of LA, this is what your rate was, and this many miles in Glendale, this is how much your rate is. But we do not regulate the rate. We leave that to the market to just, to set the rate.
Okay. Thank you. Any of my colleagues have
Yes.
any? Yes.
Well, I've been in a business for the last 30 years. I never see business this bad about cab companies. I use cab companies to see exactly what they are doing lately. They're crying, especially in Glendale. We are not in Burbank because Burbank has an airport. There's a lot of tourists come to Burbank. At this time, we don't have any we don't need to have any computation to kill our business in Glendale. So I'll deny the motion.
Okay. Mr. Welch?
I have a few questions, yes, to follow up with. How many of the current 81 cabs that are licensed in Glendale are also licensed in other cities? Do we know that?
I believe that I may not be accurate, but since the owners or representatives are here, I think they can, Commissioner Welch, they can give you a more accurate.
Okay.
I rather just, I think we may have it in our database, but it will be, I think that's a very good question to ask the current operators that are operating. I believe People Taxi is in Glendale and in Pasadena, both of them. The other cab companies are in Burbank and Pasadena. If I'm incorrect, I think we can ask the representatives here to address the commission on that, or the attorney for Mr. Gantis.
Thank you, Mr. Welch, Commissioner Welch, Mr. Bagdanian. All of the vehicles owned that are operating under the GNS and Tri-City Transportation dispatches are licensed only in Glendale. They only operate in Glendale. They don't
Only in Glendale?
Yes. Now, when I say operate in Glendale, they can pick up in Glendale, and they can take to, and they will go to other cities, obviously, but that they are licensed only in Glendale.
But they will not. They're not allowed to
No,
pick
they're not
up
allowed
in
to do it, but
Burbank
then
or Pasadena.
We have vehicles that are licensed in Burbank that would be able to pick it up and take the trip back.
So within your network, you have other cabs that are licensed in other cities.
Oh, yes.
The particular ones licensed in Glendale are only licensed in Glendale. Is
That's
that what
correct.
you're saying?
That's correct. But we are licensed. We have cabs that are licensed in Burbank. We have cabs that are licensed in Pasadena as well.
Okay. This is a little off subject a little bit, but just as a question, do we know how many cabs that operate in the city are hybrid vehicles? Do we check on that?
None, to the best of our knowledge. That's been one of the areas that I know the cab industry is moving in that direction. I believe City of Los Angeles is taking a lead on requiring, at a certain time frame that as they retire their old vehicles, that the cab companies start looking into hybrid vehicles. But in general, that is one of the areas where we would foresee in the future, with Commission's approval, that if we're going to add more vehicles, that we try to at least a certain percentage to be set aside or require that. If we're going to add 10 cabs, for example, that certain percentage of those vehicles to be hybrid. Keep in mind that, again, it's an expense for the vehicle. For the cab operators to do that, but in general, that's a direction that I think we should be pursuing.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I think that, it's not germane to this discussion really, but I think for the future it should be. So I'm still not quite clear on the question that was raised about all of the interrelationships amongst them. Can we ask the attorney also that question about who owns what cross ownership that there is, and stuff like that?
Thank you, Commissioner Welch, members of the Commission, Mr. Bagdanian. Just reminding you as a backdrop, the tabs themselves, remember, we have them owned by the individual operators, the companies that do the dispatching, that provide the group, if you will. GNS and Tri-City do, in fact, share ownership of the same company, yes.
Okay, but not the San Gabriel Transit?
San Gabriel Transit does as well.
Does what?
It shares the same ownership as Tri-City and GNS, but not People's.
Okay.
But the same, as I understand it, the same holds true for, I don't represent obviously San Gabriel Transit, but the same holds true in terms of the ownership of the vehicles. Yes, they're registered, just so we're clear on that issue. They're registered. For instance, the Tri-City ones are registered in Tri-City because we can't provide insurance for vehicles that don't have our name on them. The legal owner, those of you that have cars know that there's two levels of ownership. There's a registered owner, and then there's a legal owner. If you finance the car, the legal owner is Ford Motor Company Credit or whatever it is. That the owner, the driver is the Ford Motor Company Credit of the registration form.
Okay, so just a quick follow-up. So,
I'm
so
sorry.
just to be clear, so there's 52 of the 81 licenses basically fall under your purview. Does the same thing hold true to what you said before, that all of those, including the San Gabriel ones, are only licensed in Glendale? Or is there some cross-licensing with other cities?
Yes.
That is also true?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, since I have you, can you tell us how does competition work then?
What competition? It's a misnomer in the taxi business is a regulated industry. It's regulated. You have people that watch over it. The competition that works is amongst itself. Service is the competition. If we didn't provide service, they would be hearing it, and he would be bringing that to you, because that's your job. Your job is to ensure that the public is adequately serviced. The competition is us. We have our own competition. The drivers, if one driver isn't performing, if we have a driver that's only got a 60% on time, we're not going to keep that driver, because that's going to ruin our on-time performance. So the competition is among the drivers themselves. The competition is the businesses themselves. We're out seeking business. The more drivers have money, the happier we are, because it keeps those drivers happy. That's how competition works. While we give them the same dispatch, it's in economies. As Mr. Morabian has indicated to you, I know he's been in the car business a lot of years. I can see with the gray hair, Mr. Morabian.
35.
But the truth of the matter is that the competition that's there, the taxi cab business, it has suffered, as all car business have suffered. So the competition, our job is to make sure that the service levels are kept high, so that there is no infighting for this reduced, this shrinking globe, if you will, of business. So that's the competition. Our competition is the service. Our competition are the people of Glendale, that we have maintained an excess of 90% on-time ratio. That's the competition. That's how it works. As Mr. Bagdani, we don't go out flagging, hey, we'll give you this ride for X number of dollars. We're regulated. We have a meter. We have to charge that. We have certain things we have to post in the cab. This is all regulated. So to say there needs to be competition, there doesn't. I mean, it is competition. It is its own competition among the drivers that we basically referee by our dispatch, by our insurance, by that kind of stuff.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cantus.
Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Cantus?
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Weissman?
As I found out when I graduated college with a degree in psychology, the first job that I was qualified for was driving a taxi. So I used to be a licensed taxi operator in the city of Los Angeles back in the mid-1970s for Red Top Cab in Venice. So I do have a little bit of an insider's view about what it is to try and make a living as a taxi driver in the taxi business. And in no particular order, my main concern really has to do with the current economic conditions that we're facing, and I'm particularly concerned about a larger number of taxi cab operators chasing after a smaller population of potential taxi cab riders. And I think, as has been discussed before, the pressure in that direction is tending to make it not viable for people to be able to make a living in that business. The other thing I notice, in looking over the numbers in the staff report, which does go back to 2003, we've had a remarkably consistent history in Glendale in terms both of the number of taxi cab companies and in the number of vehicles. And because of that history, that kind of makes me feel that I need to really see some strong, compelling reasons for wanting to make any kind of significant increase above the current cap that we have in place in Glendale. I'm not unsympathetic to what Mr. Evans mentioned about wanting to get his foot in the door, and I don't know if my colleagues might be interested in maybe having some discussion, about the specific number that's being proposed right now for the cap. But I don't really see a compelling need right now for a large increase in the cap. And I think that's about it for me for now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Weissman.
Can I
Yes,
chime
Mr.
in a
Walsh.
little bit on that?
Sure.
I mean, I agree to a certain extent that the business doesn't really justify a higher cap, but what concerns me is notwithstanding the fact that the individual cab owners are cabs are owned by different people, but there's still a great deal of concentration. 65% of the licenses are basically held, or under the common control of a single company through cross ownership and stuff like that. And talk about competition. That is not a lot of competition. So that is something that concerns me, that we're keeping the door closed to benefit, basically one company who has such a large concentration of cab ownership in the city. So, I'm not sure how to deal with that because we've got some conflicting issues on that. But it does raise some concerns for me about, how the licenses are issued, and perhaps we should consider some methodology to allow for some increased competition in the licenses that are issued.
Well, let me ask, just so I know it's going to be known, is since the business is slow and everybody's telling us from different individual here, the average is 14% a quarter, 15% a quarter, 20% I heard. Are any of you willing to give up some of your licenses? Yeah, I know. Because we're talking about competition, and that's the same issue I have. Okay.
Well, if I may, we've actually got two separate situations, as Jono mentioned. We're just considering the cap tonight. We're not considering any application for any X number of taxi cabs
Yes, Mr.
to
Chairman.
be added.
If I may, I think at this point, if you wish to take more information, again, this is a good opportunity where you have competing interests, and I've been with this taxi business for 20 years, and there's really not a right formula. I mean, as I said, you can see there are cities with 55 operators. Either they're individual operators, they have multiple cabs. You have cities with maybe two operators, and they're doing the service. Does one city with 7, like Pasadena, with 7 cab companies provide a better service versus one suite? There's no studies, and I can't put my hands on it, and that's what we were trying to do, is to see if there was some kind of a trend in one cities. Is there a certain threshold per population in terms of how many cabs, regardless of how many cab operators, but how many cabs? The nature of the business is that you have individual cab operators that are either under an association, as was mentioned, they partner together under a nonprofit organization, and then they have a board of director that gets reelected every year. They combine their marketing effort, their dispatching effort, so that they can reduce the cost per cab operators. Some of these cab company drivers, they rent or lease the cab from the company. It's like their own, but they pay a monthly or daily rate, and then they whatever business they do above the rate they keep. Some of them, they own the cab. They go to the company to take advantage of their marketing, dispatching operations. So really there isn't a good formula or a model that says it's going to best fit Glendale or any other cities. So my suggestion for the commission is you have the option. We don't touch the cap. You keep it as 82. You can reduce it by 1. Again, we're not married to that number. If you want to keep it as reduce it or not reduce it. Our goal was to get enough discussion, dialogue today so that we can surface the, both sides of the point of this discussion. Or, as you said, Mr. Chairman, if, everybody argues that there's not enough business, again, maybe arbitrarily you say, I'm going to reduce it by 10%, okay? And if businesses pick up next year, then you'll have those 10% number of caps available to the current operators to come back and get it, or future operators who want to get it. So that's another option. I'm not saying that's the right formula, but there is not a right or wrong formula, because you'll hear from the operators, depending on the nature of the business and what they're operating, they could make that argument, one argument here, another argument somewhere else. But obviously the competition, my suggestion should be, we're probably one of the most restrictive cities in the cab business. Whereas we have the need and necessity provision. Pasadena doesn't. You got your license. If you have a vehicle, you can go and apply for a license. You can get it. Burbank doesn't do the same thing as we do. But we've always been concerned to make sure that the right operator is in Glendale. And so, but if Commission chooses to increase the cap, we don't have any objection. You can try that. You want to reduce the cap, we don't have an objection. Historically, it's kind of stayed balanced, and it hasn't been. Technically, yes, it's been closed, because the demand hasn't been out there to show that all of a sudden there is more business that would justify the increase. So we tried, as you saw, we went to the Americana, we went to the Galleria, we went to the Embassy Suite. Granted that those businesses haven't been in operation, and believe me, it will be a great thing to have if economically they generate so many trips, because there's more sales tax dollars for Glendale. So more taxi cabs are definitely justified at that point. So you have those three options. When staff were not, 100% adamant about one way or the other. If you feel that we need to increase the cap or give it an opportunity, that's fine. If you want to reduce it or keep the same, we're okay with either one of those options.
Well, I'm not interested in increasing. I do know the business is slow. I have a little issue about competition. So this is not an issue today. That's fine. But do we have an option to reduce the amount of caps today, or this is a different agenda?
And I defer to the city attorney, but Commission has the authority to set the cap. The only issue that raises, if, let's say, arbitrary, you decide, not arbitrary, but if you decide to reduce it by 10%, I don't think that can be applied immediately or retroactive, Ms. Sansoni, as far as what happens if we did that, because I don't think the code addresses it. It will be like next year, when they come in to renew their permit, then let's, for the sake of discussion, take Bell Cab has 12. If you reduce it by 10%, then you'll go down to 10. That's when we will have to do. We'll tell Bell Cab you can only license 10. And we don't want to do a partial, we can't do a partial, so almost take everything by 10%, round it up to the higher number. It will be more than 10% because you will see some of the ratios that will change. But that's an option. We can, you can get some input now from the current operators, as I believe you try to ask that question.
Right.
What happens, and then what happens later on. We have 10 permits that is out there in the following year if business economy picks up. Everybody, it's a free market. They'll come in with their need and necessity requirement. You can evaluate each one of their proposals or their applications in terms of their marketing, type of vehicle maybe, and so on. Then that's another fair approach to give everybody a chance at that point if the business is down. That's the caveat maybe.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. John.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So, given all that Mr. Bagdani has said, personally, I would actually approve an increase in the number of cabs, because I don't necessarily think that allowing other cab operators who may be licensed in other cities to also be able to pick up in here is that bad a thing. But and especially looking at the chart, comparing against other cities, with Pasadena at 120, Anaheim 230, Burbank 130. I think our cap is pretty restrictive. So I would not be opposed to increasing it. But it doesn't sound like there's a consensus to do that. So if we're going to make a reduction, I think the reduction of 1 is not sufficient, and I think John's suggestion of a 10% or something like that reduction is much more appropriate, and that is what I would support.
Okay.
I think actually I was somewhat persuaded by your argument. I think I would be willing to accept probably a small increase in the cap. 50, 70 vehicles, that's way too much. Something a little more modest I would be willing to support.
You mean an increase?
An increase, sorry. Did I say?
Increase or decrease?
Increase. And otherwise, if there's not a consensus to do that, then I would not make any motion at all, so it would stay at 82.
Same with me.
Okay. 82 or 81?
82.
Okay. Mr.
I said before, we don't need to increase any cap. City of Glendale. Also, we don't want to decrease anything at this time. Economic is not that great to think about it, what you have to do next. Let's leave it the way it is until next year.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, if you choose to keep the cap, Senators, we will bring the UITD application back to the Commission because if the Commission chooses to keep the cap as is as 82, then UITD has submitted an application. It is, yes, it's 470 permits as you heard them. They still, if they have to get one, they're still, my understanding, and if I'm incorrect, that they would still want to pursue that one application. So we will bring their application to the Commission. Then they will be considered for one permit that they would have to operate. In most cases, maybe it's not practical, but that's up to their decision. If they can inform us they want to compete for that one permit, that's their choice. They can submit we will continue processing their application. If they choose not to do that, then they can come back next year as part of the window and apply for it. That's up to the applicant. But that would allow we will bring that application back to the Commission.
Okay. Do we have a leverage if we increase by 1 or 5 or 10, which company can have those licenses as a city?
In terms of if you increase the number of permits from 82 say to 90, let's say, I'm going to ask Ms. Sensen, because I think the code, because we're doing it this time in the middle of the process, I don't know how the code will deal with that. In other words, is UITD then will be the only, I guess if I'm asking a question, trying to understand your question. In other words, would it be just one operator, or you would allow other operators to come in and compete for that number of additional permits that now it's available?
I'm more talking specifically company. I know how the operator works, like, let's say United versus the companies that we have, one of those five, versus one of those 5 companies, a new company coming to the city.
Okay.
We have a leverage if we increase, since Mr. Welch we're talking about competition, to have an additional company coming and do business in the city.
In addition to UITD?
Right.
And existing operators?
Correct.
I think if we open it up, that's a Commission decision. If we increase the cap to whatever that number is, and if you want to allow anybody to compete for it, so you have maximum amount of competition, then I don't think we could be restrictive. Any operator who's interested in coming in and applying for it, I think we will consider it.
Mr. Chair, this would also be for those applicants who make the application during the window period.
Right.
Whoever's applied for additional vehicles or new vehicles would have to be during the application period. We only have one right now.
We have one that applied during the application period, which is UITD. So if we increase the cap right now, they'll be entitled to that number that you've increased it. What I think I was going to want to clarify, if anybody else right now wants to come in, also just because now it's open and you can increase the cap, you can apply for it. That's something I don't know if the Commission, part of their motion, wants to allow that. They can.
In other words, to reopen the window, is that
to
what you're
reopen
saying?
the window, technically, usually outside the window, there should be, the code addresses that there should be justification. In other words, that there's additional business or there's some special
event.
However, I believe that only applies to the existing operators.
That's right.
The reason that we put that language in, right now the code allows that in case of the existing operators on their outside the window can come to the commission and ask for additional cap. The reason we put that provision in there that the Northridge earthquake, when it happened, and all of a sudden Metrolink was shut down, there was a number of problems. So the cab companies were doing a lot more trips. So we automatically allow the existing operators to come in, add more cabs, so that they can get over that hump in terms of the transit services. So we put that provision in there because of the earthquake that happened. So if we have a catastrophe, or God forbid a catastrophe, but something that results in a increased transportation, existing operators can. There's nothing in the code, I believe, that would restrict allowing other operators, existing or others, if the commission increases the cap to apply for it. I guess, if you...
The code does not allow for additional vehicles unless there's a special situation, as Jono mentioned, be it a natural disaster or some special big event like the World Cup that came to Pasadena a few years ago. Otherwise, the applications would be made during the window period for additional vehicles. What the Commission can do is, if it chooses to increase the number of vehicles for the cap, then the existing or the applicant that's applied during the window period has an opportunity to have its application heard. The Commission is not required to give all of those vehicles to the new applicant. It has a choice as to whether all of those vehicles would go to the new applicant or not. So that's not something on the agenda tonight, obviously.
Right. Okay.
Question. If say we left the cap alone, okay, and United came in with their application and it was for one, but then at the same time they said, oh, but we'd really like it if you'd give us 20, would the Commission have the option at that point in time of raising the cap at that meeting?
That would have to be agendized as to increasing the cap. So they cannot do it unless the Commission is first going to consider increasing the number of vehicles cap. That has to be a separate item.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't we allowed to just, when we were doing the emergency vehicles, allowed to increase the number of allowed licenses? Is that a different thing?
Yeah, the emergency vehicle does not have a cap.
Okay.
You can increase it.
This is for taxis.
This is for taxi. Taxi has a cap.
Okay.
The question I have is, I guess, under the current condition, I understand where the Commission wants to provide opportunities for potentially more competition. If the Commission increases the cap at this point tonight, say, let's add 10% or whatever that number is, does that restrict that that would only allow existing applicant UITD to compete for those? Or does the Commission want to allow others that haven't applied during the window to also compete for those?
Well, as I understand it, we can't do that.
I understand. That's why I want to clarify, so that when staff goes back, and if you increase the cap for whatever that number is, that would only allow UITD that applied during that period to apply for those numbers. Not necessarily they'll get it, but they will get some of those or all of those, depending on what that number is.
There's another option that I can see, and that is that the Commission open up the cap to be effective with the next round of applications during the window period.
Let me ask a question to Mr. Walsh. Are you suggesting to increase the cap for the sole reason to have additional companies to compete with the current one we have, or are you...
Well, I'm compelled for two reasons. One, because I think that the cap might be a little overly restrictive compared to what other cities are doing. And secondly, because I do want to decrease the concentration of the control and dispatch from what it is now. That said, I'm not necessarily, given what I've learned, I'm not necessarily inclined to, increase the cap, which I know is only going to benefit one company. I mean, I'm a little hesitant to do that as well. So given that, I think that I'd just as soon just leave the cap as it is.
I agree.
And we can revisit it at a later time. So
Works
that'll
for me.
give them an opportunity to come in, get a foothold, and then when the next time comes up, we can reconsider before the window opens of raising the cap.
Okay, so so before you make a motion, obviously, just in summary, what you're looking for is we keep the cap at 82. So we will change the motion that currently we have submitted to you. We can revise it. That's not an issue. I can
Actually,
reword it.
even
Mr.
need to
Chair,
make a motion?
if you choose to leave it as is,
There's no need
motion needs
for
to
a
be,
motion.
voted
And
on.
then we will process the UITD application technically for that one permit that's available, and we'll bring that back to the commission for your consideration. And if you choose to give them that one permit, then they'll have one permit to operate. They can, again, depending on what happens next year, we'll give you another update. We'll have a better see where the economies, where the trips are, and that can go forward.
Yeah, but let's please do it at a time where it's before the window opens so that it gives
Yes, you
people
will. Sure.
competition a chance
Yeah.
for people to come in. Okay.
Sure, of course.
Okay.
Okay.
Having said that, then we'll leave it. No motion required, you said, Ms. Sansoni. Okay. Thank you for coming.
Well, do we still move to
Item?
adjourn?
Item 4, adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, thank you.